After Socrates refutes Callicles using the coward's pleasures argument, Callicles drops out of the conversation. He doesn't really want to talk anymore. He continues saying things like yes and no and whatever just to get the conversation to a close. But at several points, he says, I don't want to do this anymore. And he gets kind of egged on by Gorgias or whoever, by the crowd to finish up. And so he continues saying yes and no and whatever. At one point, however, Callicles does simply refuse to respond. He just refuses to respond to Socrates. And it's at that point, actually, that Socrates develops his ethical theory. So Socrates, seeing that Callicles isn't going to respond, starts responding for Callicles. And so Socrates kind of just starts talking to himself. He doesn't have anyone left to talk to. And he develops an ethical theory. And what I mean by his ethical theory, Socrates develops an account of the good life. One question you might have after Socrates' refutation, right? Socrates' refutation of Callicles refutes this idea that a good life consists in doing what you want. Plato and Socrates would say, no, it doesn't. It really, really doesn't. What then does it consist in? What is a good life? Socrates' ethical theory, this is what I'm calling it. Socrates doesn't call it an ethical theory, but Socrates' ethical theory answers that question very briefly. Socrates paints very briefly a picture of what a good life would look like. He doesn't go into very much detail, but what he does tell us is very suggestive and will be taken up by later thinkers such as Aristotle. And so we're going to see Aristotle follow in very similar footsteps as Socrates here, but Aristotle's going to go in much, much more detail. All right, so what is this ethical theory? The idea is something like this. We thought the good life, or, a common intuition or common sense view of the good life is that it consists in doing what you want, but we just saw that that's incorrect. Well, I don't know. What is it then? What is it to live a good life? I mean, this is kind of hard. At the very least, there's controversy about it. So, Callicles says what he says, but that seems problematic in certain way. And so what is it? I don't know. It's kind of difficult to say. What does the good life amount to? Socrates' move is to say, let's not tackle that question head on. Instead, let's look at something we all agree about. Let's look at how goodness operates in an area that we can all agree about. Maybe that will contain the key for what a good human looks like, what a good human life is. So what would that be? What would be an area where we all agree about what's good and why? Socrates says the crafts, or as we've seen the Greek word techne. Socrates is going to develop his own account of the good life by drawing an analogy with the crafts, with techne. The basic move is to say, well, look, we all agree about what a good doctor is, right? That's a craftsperson in the kind of Greek terminology. We all agree about, what a good, I don't know, what a good house looks like and what a bad house looks like. Houses are the products of a certain craft. Yeah. And so Socrates' move is, well, let's look at how goodness works when it comes to something like houses, when it comes to the crafts more generally. And then maybe that will kind of enlighten us to a certain degree. We'll understand how goodness operates in that realm. And we'll apply that then to the human case, right? It's analogous to the human case. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to focus on a table. We're going to have a good table there on your left and a bad table there on your right. And the idea here, the reason this is supposed to work, the reason it's supposed to be intuitive, is that we can all see that that table on the left, that's what a table's supposed to be like, right? That's a good table. Whereas that table on the right is a real bad looking table. If you were in the market for a table and you were given these two drawings, illustrations of a table you can buy, you'd go for the one on the left, right? Socrates' move is to like dig into that. Why would you go for the one on the left? What is it about it that makes it good? And then we'll elucidate some sort of, conceptual framework and then apply that to human beings. So start with the one on the right, the bad table. Why is that table not any good? Well, for starters, it's not level, right? And so if you tried to place anything on it, it'd just roll off. Moreover, it doesn't look like it's going to be stable. Yeah, the legs aren't the same size, and so it'll wobble. So it's not level. Things will roll off it. It's not stable. You can't really rest on it or rest things on it. Yeah, it's no good. Well, we can probe a little further. Why is it not level? Why is it not stable? Well, this is maybe too easy to even think about. This is so obvious that you would never state it, but it's because the measurements are all off, right? The legs are all different lengths and whatever, right? And things aren't cut properly, and it doesn't have the proper kind of structure. It doesn't have the proper arrangement of its parts, order of its parts. Its parts aren't properly proportioned. That's what makes the table non-level. That's what makes the table lack stability, right? It's the mismeasurement, misarrangement of all the parts. Obvious. It's supposed to be, right? Let's consider now the good table. What makes it good? Well, in the first place, it's level and it's stable. The legs are the same length, and so you can place things on it and they won't roll off, and you can rest on it and it won't, wobble. Push a little deeper. Again, this might be kind of obvious, and so we wouldn't push this far in just ordinary life. But why is it level and stable? Well, because it's arranged properly. It has the proper measurements. It has the proper proportions. It's ordered, arranged, organized properly. Yeah. Socrates now is going to use this. So this is a specific example. Socrates doesn't use a specific example like this, but we can generalize from this specific example to get the claims that Socrates wants. So what we saw is that what makes the table good are certain features or characteristics it might have: being level, being stable. And we could list other ones too. Being not being like too soft or pliable or whatever, right? Having a certain kind of rigidity, being flat and whatever, right? You could list a bunch of other kinds of features of tables that make them good, and that if they lack these features, they're bad, right? So the bad table is not level, it's not stable, it's not flat, blah, 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 and so it's bad. The good table has those characteristics, and so it's good. Those characteristics, right? And we could list more if you were really into tables, but those characteristics Socrates calls the excellences or virtues of a table. Now, it's a little bit odd in English to say the table has virtues. Virtues are things that apply only to human beings, at least in English. But in Greek, the word for excellence and the word for virtue is the exact same word. And it's not at all odd in Greek to talk about the virtues of a table or of a hammer or of a horse or of a plant or of a human being. That's not at all odd in Greek, even if it sounds odd in English. But the excellences, the virtues, right? The excellences of a table are going to be those kinds of characteristics. And so the general point that Socrates wants to draw out of this is that something like a table, a product of a techne, a product of a craft, comes to be good by having the excellences proper to the specific kind of thing it is, by having the proper excellence, right? And so the proper excellence of a table is going to be something like being level, being stable. What I mean by proper here is it's the excellence that's kind of appropriate or suited to the thing in question, in this case, a table, right? And so a table comes to be good by being level and stable. More generally, a product of a craft, of a technique, comes to be good by having the suitable excellence, by having the proper excellence, or proper excellences if there are multiple ones. Yeah, that's the general point. But look, we pushed our analysis a little bit further. Socrates talks all about order and arrangement and proportion and so on. Well, Socrates' point here, kind of mirroring our deeper probing when we are looking at these two tables, the products of a craft come to have their proper excellences by being organized or arranged or ordered properly, right? And so when we are looking at the tables, what our angry fella judge of tables was saying was that, look, that bad table lacks stability and fails to be level because it doesn't have the proper order or organization. It's this lack of measurement and proportion and arrangement and order, or however you want to refer to it. That's what makes it uneven, unstable, whatever, right? By contrast, our good table that's level and stable, the reason it's level and stable is because it has the proper order and arrangement and proportion of its parts. The legs are all the same length. That's its order and arrangement. That's what makes it level. Yeah. And what this means is that in order for a product of a craft to be good, it has to be ordered or arranged properly, because the order and arrangement give rise to the excellences of the thing, and the excellences of the thing are what make it good. Right? So we get this kind of linkage of concepts. First, Socrates links good to excellence, and then he links excellence to arrangement or order, right? And you can kind of go both ways. In order to be good, it has to be excellent. In order to be excellent, it has to be ordered or arranged. That's one way. Or you could go the other way. If something is ordered or arranged, then it will have its excellences. And if it has its excellences, well, then it will be good, right? This is how it works in the products of the crafts according to Socrates, with regard to the products of the crafts according to Socrates. And you could run this for any kind of product of the craft, right? You could talk about painting. Painting is a kind of craft, right? You know, painting a landscape. A painting comes to be good by having its proper excellence. Call it beauty, right? So a painting is good if it's beautiful. Well, how does it come to be beautiful? Well, by having a certain order and organization of colors and shapes and lines and so on, right? By being composed in a particular way. That's the order or arrangement of a painting. Yeah, something like that. And so you could, same kind of idea. Socrates' move in his ethical theory is to take this conceptual framework that we can all agree on, that seems kind of obvious or at the very least intuitive, take this conceptual framework and apply it to human beings, because we agree on how goodness works here. We agree on what makes a thing good. Well, why don't we take this framework that we can agree on and apply it to human beings? After all, what we're interested in is the human good, what makes a human being good, what it is for a human being to live a good life. And so that's the next step. So what Socrates is going to do is he's going to take those two ideas that we get, that we can kind of distill from looking at products of the crafts and what makes them good. He's going to take those two ideas and apply them to human beings. Now, to be very specific, I believe he applies them to the human soul. But what I'm going to do, I'm just going to talk about applying to human beings. Doesn't really matter. Doesn't make much of a difference for our purposes. Right? So if we take that first idea, the product of a craft comes to be good by having its proper excellence, and apply that to human beings, we get the following claim, right? So the main move, just to reiterate, let's take this framework we agree on, and maybe the human good works the same way. Let's apply it to human beings, right? Okay, we're doing it now. A good human being then is going to be one who has the excellences of human beings, right? A human being comes to be good by having the excellences appropriate or suitable to human beings. Well, what are those? Socrates doesn't give much of an argument for this, but he just says, well, look, we all know what the excellence of a human being are. The excellences of a human being are. They're the virtues. And again, in Greek, there wouldn't even be a difference in word there. Virtue and excellence is the same word in Greek. And so a good human being is one who has the virtues. And the virtues that Socrates lists are these three: bravery, which I'll sometimes call courage. Same thing. I just put it in quotation marks or in parentheses there. Bravery, justice, and piety. Piety is the least familiar of those. That's kind of doing what's right for the gods, to the gods, kind of being religious, being pious, something like that. Those are the excellences of a human being, according to Socrates. Those are the virtues. So a good human being is going to be one who is brave, just, and pious. That's the kind of first idea. Well, now look at the second idea. How do you get to have those virtues? A human being comes to have those virtues, those excellences, by a certain kind of order or arrangement. And the way Socrates puts it, by being ordered or being arranged properly, by having one's soul in the proper order or arrangement. Well, what is the order or arrangement of the human soul, of a human being? Socrates says it's self-control. He doesn't give much of an argument for this. He kind of just puts the idea forward. The proper arrangement or order of the human soul is going to be self-control, or what could also be translated moderation or temperance, right? This is exactly what Callicles had denied these better people would have, right? So Callicles talked about the better people and how they're going to rule over other people. And then Socrates says, are they going to rule over themselves? And Callicles says, what do you mean? And Socrates says, are they going to have self-control? Are they going to rule over themselves? And Callicles says, no, they're going to let their pleasures get as big as possible, and so on. And he goes on to all this hedonism stuff. What Socrates is now saying here is that the proper order arrangement of the human soul is going to be self-control. It's going to be one where desires don't just get as large as possible and go wild, but there's some kind of control exhibited over our desires, over our lives, over ourselves, right? And that kind of control, it's not to say that you completely shut out your desires or anything like that. It's to arrange them properly, to order them properly, right? That's Socrates' idea. And so self-control is what gives rise to these other virtues, according to Socrates. And again, he doesn't really give much of an argument here, other than saying, well, look, surely someone who kind of has control of their appetites and desires and has mastered themselves, surely this self-controlled person is not going to do what's wrong to other people. They're not going to be unjust. Surely they'll be just. And surely this person who has mastered themselves won't fly away in the face of fear. Surely they'll be brave. And surely someone who has mastered themselves is not going to do what's wrong to the gods. Surely they're going to be pious, right? Something like that. That's all Socrates says. So the arrangement of the human soul. So typically self-control is also called a virtue, and that's fine for our purposes to think of self-control as a virtue as well. And so really in the Gorgias, there are these four virtues: bravery, justice, piety, and self-control. But Socrates singles out self-control as being especially important because it's what kind of gives rise to, gives birth to almost these other virtues. And so self-control is really the central virtue. It's the order arrangement of the human soul that gives rise to the other virtues. And so it's ultimately what's responsible for making us good people. And so Socrates' ethical theory, in a nutshell, is this: the good life is a self-controlled one. The good life consists in a life of virtue, which is going to be exemplified by bravery, justice, piety, and self-control. And so in the same way that a table is a good table because it's level and stable, and it's level and stable because it's ordered properly, well, so too, a good human being is one who is brave, just, and pious. And a human being comes to be brave, just, and pious by having self-control. And so what we should really be aiming at in our lives, according to Socrates, is self-control, is virtue, power, money, pleasure. Those are not the proper aims or ends of a human life. And your life should not be devoted to those things. It should be devoted to virtue, and in particular, self-control. Don't just do whatever you want. That's the lack of self-control. Rather, master your desires, channel your desires, right? Control yourselves, be moderate. That's the sketch of the good life that Socrates gives us in the Gorgias.